Hi, Connie. So good to see you
Oh,
again.
hello, wonderful to talk again.
I guess we want to do this again and see what comes out for everybody, because that's our heart's desire is to want to be useful.
Exactly. I love talking to you because you just give me new ideas and new ways to say things and
Same,
um,
same.
open up, open up more and more uh, juice.
Yeah, exactly. And we keep it real, I feel, you
I
know.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to speak about this so that people get a real sense of what awakening really can be and is, at least how it shows up for us.
And for the possibility for them.
And that's exactly it, the
Yeah.
possibility and that it is possible. So the question that we came up with was how what did love blah, blah, blah.
Start out with a flub. Perfect.
They say if you start off any journey and you have a mishap, that the rest of the journey is going to go well. So let's see how it's okay.
We'll
What did
call.
life look like for you before awakening? And what's different now is, yeah. What
That is such a good question because on one hand, everything's changed. And then on the other hand, nothing's changed.
Mhm.
So, which is, of course, hard to describe. But so I've been awake for a really long time, since 1990. So I was very young at the time,
Yeah.
35 years old, and my searching period was, 20, 25, 30, those years, which the world was very different then.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's funny, it's two things. It's like, one, I can't really remember what I thought I was looking for. That's the thing that has me kind of
Really?
curious. What did I think I was doing when
Yeah.
I was searching?
What
That's
what were you searching for?
yeah. Well, I mean, specifically, when I was young, it was the 60s hippies revolution, right? 1969, I was just coming out of high school. I graduated in 1972. So, Vietnam War protests, I mean, the whole
Wow.
thing. Yeah. And the big thing about it was we knew as really, really young people that something was intricately wrong with our world, that we had been conditioned to be something that wasn't natural,
Yeah. Yeah, right.
right?
That's that
Right?
was that was a beautiful collective sentiment for the young folks.
And isn't it still today?
Well,
Um,
something's definitely not right with the world.
mhm, yes.
It's a little more complicated now with technology
Uh-huh.
there, but
Yeah.
yeah. So, do you remember anything about yourself? I know that was a long time ago that um that after you had that awakening experience, which you described earlier to me before we went on
Hmm.
air, we went on air, um, that it's ongoing and that the awakening is still going on. So that's something, you know, first of all, maybe you could just talk about that first. It's like, what do you mean by that?
Right. Well, I would phrase it a little bit different because the awakening was an awakening and then I'm awake. But the me that's awake is developing and learning
Yeah.
probably even faster and better than the me that was asleep.
Yeah.
The me that was asleep was stuck,
Hmm.
very stuck. I felt like the world was against me,
Hmm.
like I didn't really know what was going on. Like I didn't fit in as the integral human being that I am.
Hmm.
I felt disconnected
Hmm.
and victimized
Hmm.
and separate. I mean, confused.
Yeah.
And but I knew that something was wrong. And for some reason, I had this absolute belief that the natural human being exists. And it just made sense to me that if it exists, I can find it,
Mm.
right? But I didn't know how. And so it was the same. So many of the things were the same, finding a teacher, um, getting caught up in stuff that was just really kind of stupid, and doing weird things, throwing myself off a cliff over and over,
Not literally.
Yeah, not literally. But so all those things are still kind of the same today. And so, but the big difference is now anything that happens, no matter how bad it is or how good it is, makes sense
Uh-huh.
because because I know who I am and I know and my intricate connection to everything. So
Yeah.
maybe that's the biggest difference, the change from life not making sense to life itself making sense.
Well, that's beautiful. That's really well said and understood. But one thing, here I am turning into this interviewer, and that was not my.
Yeah, yeah, now it's your turn.
No, you get to have your turn, okay?
I'm done. What else can I
No, no, but
say?
I do want to ask this one thing for people who are listening is when you said that awakening took place and that was done deal, and then it's more learning how to live that awakening, right? But what
Yes,
is the done deal for you? What is, what's remained and what was that?
right. It's the knowing who I am.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and but then that's kind of the weird mystery part too, because it's like retroactive.
Mhm.
When I realize who I am, I realize that I've always known who I am.
Yeah.
And how was I missing it is the question.
The big
All
question.
those
That's
years.
only, and it's funny, isn't it, Connie, how that question is only available when you're on the other side. How could I have missed this? Until
Right.
then, it's so missed. It's missed.
Yeah, how can it be that mist?
Hmm.
Mist in the mist.
Yeah, it's so misty. Hazy. It's called Maya. Maya is very misty.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, for me, it was a definite moment of stepping into myself and boom, seeing who I am.
Yeah, wow. That
I've
must have
heard
been
your
such a,
story and you sound more sliding into it.
well, I don't know, but I just want to, let me just, there's something you said. I guess I'm not done with you yet. So you said boom, that happened. So what that was that a big shock for you?
No, it was really kind of funny. It was so have I ever told you my story? I'll give it real quick. I was a sannyasin with Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh Wright Osho,
Right.
and he had always said that when he died, all of his sannyasins would be enlightened.
Oh,
And I was like young, naive, trusting. And so then he died. But he died in the middle of the night. He was in India and I'm in Idaho. And so when I woke up and I heard that he had died, I
mm,
knew that he'd already been dead for hours. So I made this crazy assumption that, oh, I've been enlightened ever since he died. I was just asleep and I just woke up, right? And
oh,
and so instead of sitting there and going, oh, I just heard he died and waiting for something to happen, I looked inside and I'm like, so what's enlightenment like? And I looked inside and nothing was there,
oh my gosh. So great. Oh
right?
gosh.
Because there's nothing there. There's nothing there. But it's like, oh, but the nothing is like everything, right? They're the same thing. And then somehow I just like stepped back into myself and realized who I am. I'm the me.
Jesus, your innocence. made all that happen. Your innocence of believing that.
Yeah, yeah, but kind of like innocence and bold craziness at the same time,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So it was my immediate response was I was living in a commune with, some other sannyasins who'd come to Idaho, and several of them were enlightened sannyasins who'd been kind of teaching me too. And I was so embarrassed. That was my immediate. I was embarrassed. It's like, how could I not know this? How could, and I was thinking of all the crazy things I had done to try to become enlightened. And so for a couple of days, I was embarrassed and I didn't say anything at all as Swami Yogino. And finally, one day, we're walking along and I said, I get it. And he was like, yeah, I see that.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's
I
good.
know.
It's good
I
to
know.
have confirmation.
Right. So, I don't know if I've ever heard that kind of a story of enlightenment before, where you're embarrassed for like 3 days.
That's so cute. Hiding under a cabbage leaf. I know
Yes.
truth.
I think I'm turning red right now just thinking
It's not the sunset. Yeah.
about.
Mm,
Yeah. So, yeah, everything changed. Uh, well, I mean, so much of my time had been spent searching.
yeah.
Didn't have to do that anymore, so all my time was freed up. And I just
True.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
A
yeah.
lot
And
more free time. All that seeking takes a lot of efforting.
it does. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then like I was talking about, but that wasn't just the end of me learning.
No.
So how do I use that particular awakening to help people?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some people are drawn to sharing this, and it takes a certain type of maturity to it, and also it's learning on there's learning on the job, so to speak, sharing with
Right.
you
Yeah.
learn a lot. It's an education in itself, especially if we're staying open and really wanting to not get solidified again with an identity, that the sharing creates an identity. Because look at me now, I'm Miss Sharer, Miss Teacher.
Or yeah. Or the philosophy. That's kind of the problem of so
Oh,
many
yeah.
Eastern religions is they come from a deep uh there's so much written about it and everything. And so you would tend to kind of stick to the same old story.
Yeah, exactly. Without the flexibility of in real life in the moment, you know, truth. And instead have it be kind of boxed. I call it being boxed in. Truth
Right.
gets
Yeah.
boxed in, and
Mhm.
then this is what truth is, and this is how you get there.
Right.
And
Right.
it's so fluid and so obviously unique. So obviously for everyone listening.
Everyone, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I sure wouldn't call myself unique. Maybe a little clumsy.
Well, we're all unique. We're all unique.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I can ask myself that question now.
Yeah. Compare it back to you. What did life look like
Yeah, what did
before
life look like?
and
Yeah,
what's different
like
now?
I guess, yeah, for me, when you say a slow slide, for me is just there were all these different twists and turns to the spiritual journey. And but when it never when the abiding, I guess we could just say when it finally there was the seeking, we'll just use that one type of awakening to be this first realization that's really done. And to me, that was the non-dual awakening, where my me taking myself as an object in any way had been thinning out, but it finally just ended. The way it ended was a really beautiful moment. I was out in nature and in Northern California, and I was sitting, and this beautiful young buck came pretty close, and I was watching it and I had been practicing this practice that I really highly recommend to people, which is to go in nature and then just sense and feel any separation that you experience between yourself and a tree or rock or a buck or whatever it is, and really see if you can close the gap to where it just becomes just one thing. Practice it being one thing instead of two things, me and that.
Right.
There's a whole process that I teach around that. But anyway, so I was looking at this buck, and it was already so thin. The veils were so thin, you know, already. And I could just feel this very thin separation between myself and what I was looking at. And by looking at that buck and just being so transfixed, it disappeared. And it had disappeared before, but it really, it disappeared. There was just the looking, just the seeing, the one thing happening. And it never went away. It just clicked and it was done, got up, and it's just, there's no more looking for something anymore because I am the looking and I am what I'm seeing, so there was no more looking for what I am. It got dissolved. And it was a big relief, and it was so beautiful. And then, so what was it like before that? I have to say, honestly, I was just an intense seeker. I was just spending a lot of time in a passionate, delighted way. I loved being a seeker. I loved looking for the beloved and finding it, and then it would kind of ebb again. It was this kind of got it and lost it kind of thing. I got it and then lived that way for a little while, and then I lost it. But it was a sort of like a dance of wooing the beloved. I'm kind of
Oh,
more of
yeah.
a bhakti type in that way.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I didn't see anything wrong with it. I never labeled it as bad being a seeker. I didn't catch that virus of whatever is out there that some people catch, that seeking is bad. And I was kind
Course,
of
seeking is important.
just any kind of doing that isn't coming from a real truth inside. This was really a movement of that which wanted to go home was doing the seeking, and it was very intentional with it, and it kind of went through some weird twists and turns that weren't always the best, but there was a lot of learning through that. And in the end, it was my life. It was my and I also was, that kind of closure. It happened in my 20s as well. And then there was more, like I was a big seeker between ages, I think all through my teens, honestly, but I didn't know what I was seeking at that time. I just knew I didn't want to be lost in the personality of high school and school, and I couldn't do it very well. I couldn't be lost in that way. I didn't want to give over. I knew that something, I mean, we would come in the way we come in. And then
Hmm.
in my very early 20s, I discovered yoga and meditation, and I just went, finally, this is the language, even though it wasn't, I still was finding my way. This is what I want, is coming back home. I knew that that was the journey. And and so when that non-dual realization took place, um it, after that, it was like what you just described. For me, it was like, okay, now how is this lived out? And so before awakening, maybe how it was lived out in, let's say, relationships. Um, there might have been some, I'm supposed to get something from like on the from the outside to fill this up a bit. You know, it's like that seeking energy for the divine could be applied to wanting love or to be met
Mm-hmm.
in love versus
Mm-hmm.
this is love. You know, this is love. So after that first realization, there was no more, I need to be completed.
You weren't empty anymore trying to fill up.
Not from anything, right? From the divine,
Right,
from
right.
something, anything, from yeah, even from nature, like almost like a hungry bird, you know, like I want to know what you are, feed me, kind of that energy of like it was just innocent because it was all misdirected off to the outside. What we are, we're whole and complete here. And then when that happens, so after awakening versus before, well then it's kind of like, and you can tell me how it is for you, but then it's kind of like there's a learning of the conditioning of how it behaved, how I behaved in my conversations, even how I did relationship, just even um, moving through life, moving through life, that the way that the conditioning had been formulated, it like had to be rewritten and undone based on this new true understanding that I wasn't needing to be filled up or made whole by anything outside of myself anymore.
Right. Yeah, and that's a really good point because it's not like all the conditionings just go away, but uh the
Yeah.
veil is gone.
And we have to practice it out and exercise it in life, right? Like, how
Mhm.
about now in this new moment, going home back to family? How does it get exercised? And right, how does truth want to be moving? And how does the
Mhm.
heart want to engage?
Right. Right. Yeah. And
You're in a relationship, you're married.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah, you weren't married to that person before the awakening, right? That would have been a
No.
very long marriage.
Yeah. Not these days, right?
Some people
No. Yeah, no, no. Yeah, that all came
later.
along between 'cause you got to live your life,
Yeah,
right?
right. And you have children, right?
I already had three children before.
Before.
So really my prime directive was to raise my children,
Yeah.
to take care of my children.
Isn't
So
that
that,
that's kind of, I don't know about for you, but I enjoyed it so much from that point of view of wholeness
hmm
and the love came so well, it came naturally anyway, but it was like seeing them as whole,
yes.
you know, it's such a gift.
And since my kind of thing was to find the natural human being, I kind of always saw my children as whole. But after awakening, I stopped lying to them. Just
Uh-huh, very interesting.
right. I mean, those subtle lies
Yeah.
that are just all the time. Well, I mean, some things like you kind of have to keep up, like Santa Claus, but I kind of did it real, you know, kind of, I
Back to
didn't
work.
do a really good job
Well,
of
it's
keeping
hard,
the Santa Claus myth
right?
whole.
You don't want
Yeah.
to fabricate reality for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And then of course I saw them as strong and capable. Like I think we lie to our children because we think they're weak and can't handle things. But
Yeah.
I've come to the conclusion lately that a human being can handle anything except lies, except especially being lied to by the people you really, really trust.
That's really powerful right there. Very powerful. One of the things that I supported my children in is their ability to say no. and
Yeah.
that I didn't have to cave to adults who thought they knew better, and that included their teachers. And there
Yes.
were a few moments that were interesting, having to collect them from school. But I mean, I didn't create rebels, but I wanted to create I wanted to support their intrinsic knowing that just because someone was in a bigger body didn't mean they knew what was right for them.
Right. Although, I mean, conversely, I was older and I knew safety versus danger and things like that. Like, don't run into the street without looking.
Yeah, no,
But
I'm talking about more deeper
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
that
yeah.
that adults are so often imposing conditioning on, we impose it on one another, and we
Hmm.
impose it on the kids as if, and it's not all good
Hmm.
medicine. It's not all good medicine.
Right. And we
Separation is taught, like separation.
Right. And young people being raised today are being raised in by very fearful parents, because anything that happens to the kids is seen as totally the parents' fault. So I think a lot of it's really self-serving, how they don't let the kids go out and play. You know, uh, it's just, I mean, you got to have helmets on and knee things on, and it's
Yeah,
like the
right.
slightest little bump is gonna kill you. The slightest germ is gonna get you,
Right, right. And don't you dare touch their friends when they come over, you know? I mean,
Right.
things have changed. I mean, we've
Yeah.
become overly careful. I see what you're saying. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Kind of like the what is it, the 5 second rule or something? You drop some food and you pick it up and
Right.
dust it off.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have hairs on it.
Oh no. But I'm just saying it's kind of like that energy that we don't know what's natural anymore.
Right.
We don't know
Right.
what's natural anymore. And that includes nowadays. So yeah, for you, what is continuing on with the awakening? What are you still learning, do you feel, in terms of present day?
Yeah, well, so much how to talk about it in
Yeah.
a useful way, because I've gone through all sorts of iterations. Um, at the very beginning, I thought people would like see me and just like, oh, you know, listen to my wisdom. And I find that, for the most part, people don't want to know that someone's awake. And so, but how to have good conversations and be uh, a good friend and a good companion and a good part of a group in a way that kind of lifts the whole group. That's an ongoing quest.
Yeah, it's a skill. It's a skill.
It's a,
Isn't it interesting how much people don't want to know about, not everyone, not the people who are listening to this, but yeah,
I,
yeah, we're in good company with one another. Um, but that has been also my experience. I've gotten really used to it and I could care less. But
yeah,
it's like, you know, it's like the elephant in the room. Everybody knows what the other people are doing, let's say at a dinner party or at a table, what everybody's doing for work, but there will be no questions here, zero. It'll just be like the elephant in the room. Let's just go around that one and not.
yeah, like who are you really, you know?
Who are you really? Yeah. Anything but that.
Yeah,
Anything but
yeah.
that. For society at large, I suppose.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have to work out of that.
Yeah.
That has to change, and that's kind of part of maybe what my quest is and what your quest is finding a different way to talk about it, because the old stories um,
Mm.
aren't that useful, particularly the stories that all come from, the Deep East. and the Enlightenment traditions.
Yeah, what I'm thinking of right now, as you say that, is the stories that make it seem like one is special,
And it's hard to achieve.
and it's out of reach, right?
Achieve.
Yeah, out of reach, special, and then it leaves the feeling of oneself being out of it. Like, how could that ever happen to me? You know,
And
if
the idea that enlightenment is the big escape.
big escape.
Escape. Like you just drift into no mind, constant
Oh,
bliss and you're
right.
floating.
For a moment, maybe for some, everybody has their moments, but some try to stay there.
Right.
And then when they start drifting down the mountain and off the floaty pink cloud, grasping it because thinking they're losing it when really it wants to be applied to life. How about now?
Right.
Awakening here now, not just in this nice, blissful, empty mind or whatever.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So if you're looking for a state that just doesn't exist or can't be sustained, you're not going to get to it and you're not going to sustain it. But if you're looking for a state that's like easy, natural, normal, who you are, who you've always meant to be, um, that humanity's birthright. If you're looking for that, then that's different.
Right, right. Well, I think that's the maturity of awakening when it matures is that it's becomes so ordinary
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
it's in every moment here, it doesn't go anywhere. So
Hmm.
it's not more here in a beautiful moment versus a less than so great moment, right?
Hmm.
Sick in bed
It's
or whatever, it's still what we are. So
it's the
that's
exact
really,
opposite of escapism.
yeah, that's the imminence I call. Yeah, it's imminent,
Mhm.
like imminent, not transcendent, but imminent.
Right.
And
Hmm.
for some reason, that's just not as sexy, for people.
No, it's
Those
harder to
stories from,
sell.
I gobbled up those stories from the East, and that was, back in the day before the internet and all that kind of stuff and anything online, any teachings or anything. There
Mm,
were just good old-fashioned books and,
right,
just a small section at the bookstore, if you were lucky, a spiritual
right.
section, and it was mostly stories from the East and, the people who had come back from the East who might have been Westerners who maybe brought some of that wisdom, or else they reported about those teachers, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, let's be a little snarky and more realistic though, because it was all men.
A lot of men, and then that's so true, and that's so true. And then the women that were listed there, they all had the divine mother feminine qualities of what men thought were acceptable for an enlightened woman to have, not
Hmm.
the full gamut of a strong cut off your head teacher. It was
Right,
they were so
right,
loving. They're so,
right.
just embracing, accepting. All those divine feminine qualities were that, like Anandamayi Ma, beautiful
Uh-huh,
being. And she
uh-huh,
was, I'm sure, very strong inside. But
right.
it's just all that projection,
Uh-huh,
about
hmm.
those women teachers.
Hmm. Right,
Right. Yeah,
right.
mostly men.
Yeah, so yeah,
So there. But it's changed now. And
that's
it's
fun.
been it's been what's important about this, I feel, is that as a woman, it's harder to find yourself in that possibility, that realization, enlightenment, whatever, awakening. Back then, I didn't even know the word awakening, and we just called it enlightenment, I guess. Um, Without having women models, you know,
Hmm.
it was harder to imagine being able to achieve it. Although I always trusted that it was I always trusted. I had no doubt. I
I
had no,
know, right?
no, but it's still stretching. It's like stretching the collective closed mindedness of the conditioned collective, in the air, opening it up, stretching it to include more, wo- that this is for everyone. This
Right.
is,
I do know that for some reason,
mm,
I totally related to the enlightened guys, and I didn't ever think of it as that can't be me. And
yeah,
I don't know why. I never, every story that like that Osho would tell, I just felt that I was as much part of that story as
that's
me.
great. I
Yeah.
didn't really so much either, but I was aware, and I
Hmm.
I was aware that that it was a male dominant field.
Right.
It's a field, a male dominant, maybe even a field, but male dominant, which would also mean that the teachings that are mostly male dominant from that era were transcendent. There were more transcendent teachings versus immanent, including the
Right.
body, including
Yes.
our feelings, our emotions, all the things that we're more about now these days.
Yeah. 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 So, yeah, because one thing that particularly a privileged guy doesn't understand is how privileged they are. And so I always look at all these enlightened guys and I'm like, somebody's feeding you. You know,
You mean like
somebody's,
from the past? And are you talking
yeah,
about the
from the
past?
past and like even now, it's like, and it's women that do that. And so it's so much easier for a guy to project like transcendence.
Yeah, right. I
But
see.
I don't think women even really, really want that
Mm. Well, I
because,
know some women teachers who are like that, and I think I see your point. And I think it's because there's a disconnect between the head and heart. And so, like it's cut off from trauma and pain. So they're more going towards the transcendent teachings. The women, some of the women teachers I'm thinking of that are even alive now, they're out there. They're out
yeah.
there. And
You
yeah.
know, one thing too, though, is that I had strong relationships that I had no intention of transcending away from. My relationships with actual people and the earth and everything was always way more important than looking enlightened.
That kept you real. That kept you
Yeah,
real. And that's so great. You were a mother, and it kept you
I'm
real.
a daughter, I'm a sister. I have absolutely no intention of doing anything to harm any of those relationships. They're all really good relationships.
Yeah,
And
that kept you real.
yeah, yeah. And so why would someone want to transcend? I don't.
See, yeah, mo most people who are, I mean, initially transcending can help one wake up because
Right.
you're disidentified from being stuck in this idea of a separate self. You just get so stuck. People are we were once more stuck. So there's
Hmm.
this moment of transcendence in terms of being able to see what's really true. It can be a period of time that lasts a while for some people, but to be addicted to it or attached or think that's the only way is only half the understanding. And I think
Well,
that people who are doing that after that initial period of time, that is sort of a good awakening, piece, important part. I think that's because it's too hard to be here, Connie. They're having a hard time coming back in, and it's too complicated, too painful, too much of a mess. And so they leap back out and then create a spiritual idea of that's what enlightenment is, and keep
is
it
that
nice and
spiritual
separate.
bypass?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Spiritual bypass. And it's not all purposeful. A lot of it's unconscious.
But maybe it's good news to people to know that
Yeah.
you don't lose your relationships when you become enlightened.
Hmm.
I hope. I mean, you could, you could just, uh, I mean, anybody can choose to be an asshole at any time.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, to become more intimate and sweet, like, because there's this understanding about how precious and impermanent and fleeting it
Yeah,
is. So there's this,
understanding.
like, I want to savor spending time with you. You're this is so precious. This is empty inside. It's already become empty. So we know what a dying is already. We already know what a type of dying is. But then the body eventually also, and all this is going to be gone. And so for me at least, um, there's already one foot for a good while that's been in the unborn. It's not here. It's just not
Mhm,
here.
mhm.
And that other foot that's here, it gets to keep learning how to savor and how precious this being here really is.
Yeah, and connecting is so fun because no matter who you're with, that moment of connecting, you're with somebody and, maybe you're just talking about a job or what happened down at the park or whatever. And then all of a sudden, boom, you just really connect with somebody. And just
Yeah,
that,
exactly. It's so sweet. There's a spark that comes through, and no matter what one's politics are, or economics, or
or
color.
how broken you are. Like I know a lot of people who are really in broken situations, children committing suicide and just terrible things, but you can like just connect right to the heart. And it's powerful for anybody
It's very
at
sweet.
yeah.
Yeah, and one last thing I want to say, and then see what else you feel like adding. I just want to add that before awakening and then after, and the evolving after, which is still now, there's more honest to goodness, compassion, and empathy for the human condition and for others and for animal life and all life. There's such intimate compassion and empathy that I'm more here and more exposed and more touched than ever before, and not protected. I'm not needing to be protected
Right.
anymore. So
Yeah.
that's one huge piece in evolution for me.
Yeah, the not protected
Yeah.
it is huge.
Yeah. No need to
Oh,
protect, because there's nothing, no person there that is needing to be protected. No
mhm.
separate self.
Not to say that like hurts and disappointments don't happen.
They can, for sure.
Yeah, but you don't have to protect yourself from it if you just like totally trust life. Maybe that's how I would end is that I went from really trusting life to really trusting life.
Yeah, and in terms of being hurt, there's a desire to keep risking to do life, to be in life, which can bring up all kinds of things. One can get hurt. People do things and hurt each other, and things happen. But there's a throwing your, I feel like I just want to be risking into life. Eat it, to eat it.
Eat it. Yeah. It's delicious.
Manja, manja, eat, eat. Anyway, I hope some of this is helpful to the people who are listening. We had fun. I can tell we had fun.
Right.